Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our sandals and stepping barefoot onto the cool, damp tiles of a medieval Islamic garden, somewhere between the 10th and 13th century. The sky glows amber as the sun leans west. The scent of crushed mint thick in the air, and the sound of trickling water surrounds you like a lullaby played on stone. Beneath your feet, geometric mosaics so smooth they feel like polished bone. Overhead, a canopy of fig leaves so wide they could shield an entire picnic. You've just entered a garden that's less about roses and more about survival and style. Because here's the twist. These weren't just pretty places to sip tea and quote poetry. They were technological masterpieces, built to beat the heat in an age before fans, AC, or even ice cubes. And if you didn't have one of these gardens, you were probably sweating yourself into oblivion behind some dusty curtain. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into this garden, the gravel path crunching softly underfoot. Just to your left, water runs through a narrow rill, barely wider than a hand, glinting with the last of the daylight. This isn't just for decoration. It's part of a centuries-old system of qanats, underground channels engineered to coax water from mountain springs all the way into the city. Picture this: underground aqueducts, hand-dug across miles of harsh desert, just to give your lemon tree a good drink. That's not gardening. That's sorcery with a shovel. But it wasn't just any lemon tree. The Islamic gardens of medieval Spain, Persia, North Africa, and beyond were curated with obsessive care. Every plant had a purpose. If it didn't cool the air, provide shade, or offer food, it had better have poetic symbolism or medicinal use. Or it was out. So what did they grow? For starters, fig trees. These were your heavy lifters. With wide, deeply lobed leaves and thick branches, fig trees could cast deep, protective shade, ideal for shielding tea drinkers, scholars, or sleepy cats from punishing heat. Bonus, their fruit was sweet, high in energy, and frankly, kind of addictive. You've probably eaten a modern fig and thought, meh, but those old varieties? Pure ambrosia. Then there were date palms, the skyscrapers of the garden world. Tall, lean, and always sun-kissed, date palms didn't throw as much shade down low, but their fronds could be trimmed and tied into cooling latticework overhead. Plus, dates? High calorie, long shelf life, and perfect for mid-afternoon snacking or breaking fast during Ramadan. Some gardeners even cultivated pomegranate trees, known as much for their jewel-like fruit as for their near-mythical status. In Islamic tradition, the pomegranate is a fruit from paradise itself, and in a hot, dry garden, its tough, leathery leaves held moisture and offered dappled shade, ideal for smaller shrubs or creeping vines beneath. But maybe the real star of your garden picnic is the mulberry tree. Broad-leafed, fast-growing, and messy in the best way, it was loved for its dense canopy and sticky sweet berries. And yes, historians still argue whether certain early varieties were native to the Middle East or imported via the Silk Road. Either way, mulberries were everywhere, on your robe, your lips, your sandals. You didn't just walk under them, you walked through them. In more elite estates, like those in Al-Andalus, southern Spain, you'd find terraced gardens carved into hillsides, with citrus trees planted in descending rows. Orange and lemon trees, especially the bitter Seville orange, weren't just about fragrance or aesthetics. Their placement was deliberate. Lower down, they benefited from gravity-fed irrigation. Higher up, shade-loving herbs like mint, basil, and even coriander. If you're noticing a pattern here, you're right. These weren't freestyle jungle gardens. They were choreographed ballets of leaf and light. Now, take a breath. Hear that? The wind brushing across woven screens, laced with flowering jasmine or rose vines. These flowers didn't grow tall, but they climbed trellises, cooled courtyards, and perfumed the air. Because let's be honest, if your garden didn't smell like heaven, were you even trying? And it wasn't just about scent. Some historians believe that these gardens mimicked Quranic visions of paradise, places of eternal water, endless shade, and reclining on cushions beneath leafy trees. In fact, some imams taught that to cultivate a just, lush garden on earth was a kind of spiritual rehearsal for the afterlife. No pressure. Even the layout of the garden was theological. The classic Chahar Bagh design, 4 symmetrical sections divided by water channels, represented the 4 rivers of paradise described in Islamic texts. But here's a fun twist. Not all gardens followed the rules. Some were long and narrow, others circular, and many featured winding paths designed to create surprise and wonder. You'd round a corner, expecting another citrus tree, and suddenly, bam! A mosaic fountain shaped like a star, gurgling into a pool lined with black basalt stones. That's right, you just walked into a geometry flex. And don't forget the latticed pavilions, those wooden shelters with crisscrossed slats, throwing patterned shadows onto the cushions below. They were usually covered in vines and cooled by misting fountains, the medieval equivalent of a backyard mister. It's not hard to imagine you there, reclining with a cup of pomegranate juice, fanning yourself lazily while someone reads aloud from a scroll of love poetry. Or maybe you're just napping. Honestly, no judgment. Now, for a bit of fringe flavor, some texts hint that medieval gardeners experimented with planting night-blooming flowers like tuberose or moonflower in shaded corners. These weren't just beautiful, they attracted moths and cooled the garden visually at dusk. Whether this was common or a luxury of eccentric poets is still debated, but either way, it makes for an enchanting detail. Of course, not everything was paradise. You had pests, especially in more humid gardens, and occasionally water shortages. Some wealthier estates employed full-time gardeners who knew precisely how to prune for maximum airflow and how to mix organic compounds, some containing pigeon droppings or ash, to repel insects. Glamorous? Number effective? You bet. And here's a reality check. These shaded havens were often just a stone's throw from punishing deserts. Step outside the garden walls and the heat would slap you like a frying pan. So yes, the garden was beautiful, but it was also your lifeline, your private air conditioner, your slice of Eden carved out of dust and sunburns. You're still in the garden, but now the air is sweeter, sharper too. Somewhere nearby, a melon has split open under the heat, leaking juice into the soil. A bee zigzags lazily toward it. You crouch down and find a shady spot under an overhanging grapevine, its twisting arms heavy with pale green fruit. If the first half of your walk showed how these gardens saved you from the sun, now you're about to taste how they fed you. Deliciously, quietly, and with a fair bit of political subtext. Let's start with the snacks. Medieval Islamic gardens weren't stocked with just any old fruit. They were filled with intentional abundance. Everything edible was chosen not only for flavor and heartiness, but for its seasonal rhythm and social symbolism. Melons, for instance, were a summer classic. Big, striped, fragrant, and carried out sliced on silver trays to impress your guests. Some varieties were so delicate they had to be eaten immediately after harvest, or they'd disintegrate into syrup, which, honestly, sounds like a fabulous problem to have. Then there were grapes, another all-star. While winemaking was a no-go in Islamic law, grape consumption was absolutely not. Fresh off the vine, dried into raisins, or even pressed into non-fermented syrups, grapes were a staple. Historians still argue whether certain estate owners quietly produced wine behind their high walls. A few fermented amphorae have been found tucked into old irrigation chambers, but the jury's still out. What we do know is that grapes were treasured, especially the tart, seedless types eaten chilled by fountain pools. And almond trees? Not only did they provide light shade and elegant blossoms in spring, but their nuts added protein and crunch to everything from pastries to meat dishes. A handful of almonds beneath a fig tree? That's basically a medieval trail mix. You brush past a rosemary bush, tiny, pungent, humming with bees, and step into a nook shaded by an apricot tree, its fruit blushing orange and gold. A quiet favorite among the elite, apricots were cultivated for both taste and looks. In some courts, the timing of the apricot bloom was considered a sign of luck or divine favor. If your tree flowered early, the poets would start whispering. But here's where it gets even juicier. You see, these gardens weren't just places to nibble snacks and escape the heat. They were social ecosystems, stages upon which alliances were forged, secrets passed, and favors exchanged. Want to curry favor with a vizier? Invite him to your courtyard for melon slices and poetry beneath the jasmine. Need to soften the mood before asking for a loan? Offer chilled rose water and a shaded bench. The garden was a tactic, a tool in the delicate art of diplomacy. And if your garden was especially lush, if your vines arched perfectly, your melons sweetened early, your water channels never ran dry, people noticed. They whispered. They wondered about your connections, your wealth, your irrigation secrets. That's right. There was status in your sprinklers. It's no surprise, then, that some rulers went full theatrical. The palatial gardens of the Alhambra in Granada weren't just beautiful. They were scripted performances. The water gushed exactly where and when it needed to. Plants flowered along your walking path in sequence. And the whole layout was designed to echo paradise, while casually showing off your architectural superiority. You, of course, probably wouldn't survive the political intrigue. One wrong planting, one wilted orange tree, and suddenly you're the guy with the sad garden. But back then, these spaces spoke volumes about your intelligence, faith, and good taste. And speaking of taste, ever heard of sour cherries? Tart, small, and totally addictive. They were often pickled or preserved in syrup and served with yogurt or rice. Gardeners prized them for their manageable size and productivity. Plus, they offered contrast. After a few figs and almonds, you wanted that mouth-puckering zing. It kept the palate and the conversation lively. In quieter corners, monks and mystics grew herbs like fenugreek, mint, and saffron crocus. These weren't just for seasoning lamb. They had medicinal uses, of course, but also ritual ones. Mint leaves floated in ablution bowls, saffron-flavored sweet rice served during Ramadan, and fenugreek, good for digestion and gossip. Gardeners knew that tending these delicate plants required timing and trust in nature's subtle rhythms. Another way the garden reinforced your patience and faith. By now, the sun has dropped lower, the vines casting wild latticework shadows across the path. You hear water again, this time from a tiled fountain shaped like an 8-pointed star. The basin holds floating rose petals. A servant probably tossed them in earlier, But let's pretend they fell naturally. It's prettier that way. You lean against a marble bench, worn smooth by centuries of daydreamers, and breathe in the air, cool, fragrant, faintly citrusy. In this quiet moment, you understand the garden's final purpose: reflection. It wasn't just a snack bar or heat shield, it was a philosophical device, a physical model of balance, divine geometry, and life in motion. The act of gardening itself was seen as moral labor, training the soul through patience, attention, and intention. Water must be channeled with care, not hoarded. Shade must be shared. Fruit must be harvested gently and given generously. Of course, not all was serene. Some records describe disputes over garden borders, or nobles competing to outdo each other with rarer plants, like imported bananas or early cotton flowers. Garden envy was real. And just as today, there were occasional scandals, stolen saplings, poisoned roots, or a night guest caught tripping over a vine that wasn't his to admire. Classic. And here's one last quirky tidbit. Some 12th century Persian poets wrote of listening trees, believed to react emotionally to their caretakers. A tree tended with love would thrive. Neglect it, and it might wither from sadness. Whether that's allegory or ancient botany is unclear, but you're probably hugging your houseplants a little more now. Even today, if you wander ruins in Fez, Cordoba, or Shiraz, you'll find echoes of these old gardens. Half a citrus tree still alive in a cracked courtyard, or faded blue tiles where water once danced. The design principles they followed, shade, flow, abundance, balance, continue in modern landscaping. But something quieter remains too. A philosophy, a pulse. So, as you stretch your legs under the grape arbor, brushing a curl of rosemary from your lap, remember, the next time you sip a mint tea or peel a fig in summer heat, you're not just snacking. You're practicing a wisdom 1,000 years old. The sun has set now. The garden dims, not into darkness, but into deep indigo. The stars above blink into place, each one reflected softly in the pool beside you. The marble bench beneath you feels cool and solid, grounding your thoughts like an anchor in this ocean of stillness. Somewhere, water still runs, gently, slowly, like a whispered secret shared between stones. The vines are still, the breeze soft, and the fruit trees hold their breath, suspended in silence. The warmth of the day lingers in the stones, but the air has shifted, lighter, calmer, like a sigh of relief. You've wandered through a world that knew how to bend sun, water, and leaf into something beautiful. Not by force, but by listening. Every shady corner you passed, every bite of fruit or flicker of reflection was shaped by care, by patience, by an understanding that nature doesn't need to be tamed, just understood. Let that stay with you tonight. The idea that beauty, real beauty, comes from harmony, not conquest. That even the smallest garden, or the quietest corner of your own space, can be a sanctuary when treated with intention. So settle in. Let the scent of jasmine and mint follow you into sleep. Let the trickle of imagined water wind its way into your dreams. You're safe now, cool and still, beneath your own fig tree of thought.